All right, welcome everyone to the next Signage live presentation here. So I'm just going to go onto my screen share. You should be able to see me. Welcome again to another live stream for Signage Live. My name is Tim, and today we'll be talking specifically about room booking. Now, room booking is an interesting feature and functionality because it's something that's actually built into Signage Live for free. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail and how that works. I realize I'm slightly off center here, so let's move over. So room booking is basically the ability for you to be able to go and create a whole different range of ways to display room booking. So we're going to talk about that in some more detail. I'm going to show you a couple of examples of what that looks like, and then we're going to go into the back end of Signage Live and just show you how that's set up, which is a very simple approach, but it just gives you that ability to start displaying content on the screen. Now, with room booking, let's go over here. So meeting rooms are the go-to project for many organizations. While Signage Live is used to power workspace communications, it also has a compelling offer specifically for booking meetings in rooms. We're going to show you a couple of different versions of that today, and whilst we do that, I'm going to kind of talk around some of the use cases that this may potentially be of benefit to. So if you're looking at room booking for the first time, this could be a really useful video when it comes to additional functionality within Signage Live. As I said before, if you've got any questions, you can drop them in on the questions section. We'll be taking those questions as we go through, and there'll be a Q&A section at the end of this. This video will also be compiled and put into the playlist, which is existing right now with all the previous live streams. So as you can see on the right hand side image there, we've got a version of the room booking, and I've actually got a video that I can show you. Obviously the intention is normally for us to set up a kind of a walkthrough video in the same way that we've done with some other functionality, but obviously due to the current situation I'm not actually able to get into the office and film it. So we've got something that I filmed just before the lockdown, and you have to excuse the quality. It isn't quite to the normal professional standard. My image seems to have gone a bit sideways here. Bear with me, let's load that up. There we go. So in essence, let's talk about how the room booking functionality works. Well, the room booking functionality will connect to either Office 365 or Google Calendars. So those two options that you have out there, so you can build your calendar functionality within either of those services, choose the one that you want, and you can integrate that into Signage Live, and then Signage Live will automatically deliver it out in a range of different methods depending on what you want to achieve. The connection between Office 365 and Google Calendar is identical, regardless of which type of app you use. And there are a range of different apps that you can choose in terms of functionality. And again, we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. You'll need to go through a process of authenticating your connection to Signage Live to either of the services that you're looking to achieve. And we'll walk you through that setup in a moment. Now, I'm going to walk you through this video in a second, and it demonstrates our touchscreen functionality. Again, this is kind of a bit of a test bed before we're going to go live, but it should give you some idea of how that works. So hopefully I should be able to switch over to displaying that live in a second. You'll see me in the background, but it's all kind of, it will give you a good understanding. Hopefully you'll be able to hear this audio. Let me just make sure I've got my audio enabled, and we'll run this video, and this should explain a really good kind of in-depth version of how the touchscreen functionality works when delivering. Bearing in mind, whilst you're watching this, it's the same delivery method as if we were delivering an image or a video when it comes to the CMS portion. This is the application that you'd manage within Signage Live, so you could potentially have this full screen or in the zone of a screen or in any other combination as you would do with any other asset. So without further ado, I'll play this video. I'll mute myself. Any audio throw on that, so let me just quickly add that into the audio mixer. Bear with me 2 seconds. Headphones, there we go. Apply. Okay, let's try that one again. It's Tim from Signage Live, just showing you through one of the calendar apps which is going to be added to the marketplace. A slightly different design. We'll be able to go in here and make a booking. In there we'll be able to select the time frame that we want to book from, so let's say 12 to 1:30, and then I can book. We can then enter in our details. And once we've added the details, when we go have a look at our bookings again, you can see that that time slot has been used. I can also go and book now, so it tells me when the next meeting is going to start. I can book a new meeting now and select that I want to start it from 11:30 and enter in my details again. Alright, and now you see we've got the red bar on the side to let us know that it's currently in a meeting and it will end in 17 minutes. Whilst I'm in that meeting room, I can extend the meeting if the availability is there, and say that actually I'd like it to continue until 11:30, and it will tell us we've successfully done that. These will all connect with Google Calendars and Office 365, just like the previous versions. So if you're updating or you're booking in from those sources, then they'll also display on these apps. If you've got any questions, feel free to reach out to us directly. Thank you very much, me. So that is a bit of an overview on the touchscreen. Oops, how do we get back onto full screen here? So that is a version of the touchscreen, just to give you an idea of how that works. Again, there's a whole range of different designs in terms of where all the organization structure is, and there's a range of those that you can go and see on the marketplace, which we'll go over to in a moment. But hopefully that kind of demonstrates to you the functionality of being able to interact with the touchscreen and actually communicate from a device back to your source. So let's say it's Google. If you update that meeting or you change that meeting time, it's going back and informing the Google Calendar of the alteration and any kind of issues that may arise. Let's say a meeting's already booked up and it's about to back into it. So this is a two-way conversation from the terms of you're booking in this application on location, and it's feeding that information back to your selected calendar service, and then it will update automatically. So a really nice and simple feature. One of the key benefits from this is, again, as I mentioned, is all of this is free within the Signagelive app, so within the Signagelive marketplace. So regardless of whether you have a standard license or a web content license, you can actually utilize this feature. You may have potentially seen in the previous video on the web content license that the web content license is a more cost-effective version of the licensing, which has a limited functionality. But web content allows the ability to show things like packaged widgets or this app that we're looking at here. So this is included in that. So you may end up seeing a situation where you have, let's say 10 or 15 or 20 or however many different digital signage screens proper, which display your images, your videos, etc. And when you come to the situation where you actually want to start expanding into huddle spaces, or you want to go into, you've got a boardroom or a meeting room that you want to have this functionality, you can add that into your Signagelive network, manage it in exactly the same way, but actually without the full cost of a full license. So there's a whole range of different ways that you can approach this. MultiRoom. So the MultiRoom app actually allows you to display multiple rooms worth of information in one screen. The version that I put here is actually a very, very simplified version. There's not a huge amount of artwork or design in this intentionally. And the reason for that is because, as I mentioned before, this could potentially be put into a layer of a zone. So you could, in theory, have other elements running around this. So you could have your own design, your own artwork that doesn't involve any additional development. It's just a transparent PNG layer on top of it, or whatever it might be, that creates the design that you want whilst holding the data on this app. So in this example, we've got 6 different meeting rooms and the times are all listed there. So obviously you won't be able to interact with this one, but let's say you have several different huddle spaces or meeting rooms that you want someone to be able to walk into a room and say, what's available to me? What can I go and use right now? Or what do I need to book in from my phone or whatever service or connection it would be? So the MultiRoom has this added benefit of being able to display multiple rooms worth of data at the same time. It will work in great combination with a touchscreen interactivity, because obviously you can go over to your huddle space or meeting room or conference room, book in that time, and the MultiRoom will update, at a centralized location where everyone can see as they're entering. So let's take you through a bit of a demonstration. The only other one that I haven't mentioned whilst going through this is the kind of standard calendar integration, which in essence is very similar to the way that the touchscreen implementation has, but without the touchscreen functionality. So just the ability to go and see what is coming up. And often, obviously, that could be because you utilize a different service, or you want someone to go onto their personal computer and update it from the Google Calendars or Office 365 support there, and it will update on the screen automatically. So those are the options, and hopefully that makes good, clear sense to you, because really the room booking application is super simple to set up and super easy to manage, because you're not really managing it yourself from a initiator perspective, the person that's originally installing everything. This is just going to be managed by those that actually want to book rooms, and you can keep fairly hands-off in terms of actually managing this. So let's go over to our Signagelive account here. So I've got this set up, and how do we actually install the calendar integration functionality for the first time? Well, as you can see, we've got our Signagelive network here. I have my Signagelive drop down, and administrators within the system can go into your Signagelive and enable the calendar integration view. When you go over there, you'll be given the option to start connecting your calendar integration via the API of whichever service it is that you're using. So this will log in a second and it will show us the details. We'll do in a moment when it connects in. Once we've got in there, we can start adding in the services that we want to connect, whether that be Office 365 or Google Calendars. So as you can see, we've got a room in there already. What I'm going to do is create a new one from scratch today just to walk you through that. But I'm going to configure my calendar services on the cog setting up here. Then you've got your option of service, so whether it be Google or Office 365. The only thing that I'm not going to take you through today is actually authorizing that, because obviously that will be dependent on your service. So when you authorize, it will take you through the process. It'll ask you to sign in to the service that you want to connect to. Once you've done that, it will confirm and ask you permission to use Signagelive when it comes to pulling that data from the service. So that's the setup pretty much done. Once you've connected, and as you can see, we've already got an authorized room in here, you'll see this room turn up on the side. We can copy the API key here, which is what we'll need to actually do the connection to the app that we'll download into from the marketplace. We can go in and edit that room. So if I go into this room, you can edit the name of it, what service it's pulling from, what calendar it's pulling from within that service, and the time zone. And then obviously you've got your API key there as well. You can have multiple rooms. Obviously, you need to connect that to the same service at the same time. So what we would normally do is grab this API key, and we'll need that for later on. So now that we've done that and we've set up our calendar integration, we can go back to our Signagelive account, and then we'll need to go and find the app that we want to use. So we can do that by going to the content dropdown, playlist and playlist editor, which, as I've mentioned in previous conversations, is predominantly where you end up spending most of your time. We can hit the plus button on the top left and go to the Signagelive Marketplace. Again, range of different free content in here for you to utilize. There's no limitation at all. But if we go over, there's an option in here called Calendar. Now, there's a couple of different versions of this. And just to talk you through these in a little bit of detail to explain what the different versions are, let me just zoom in here so you can see it a little bit easier. There are services, or there are devices out there specifically supported with Signagelive. So we've got the Bluefin here and the Idea devices. They are kind of the touchscreen interactive tablets almost, although they're not necessarily a tablet, but the touchscreen small screens. And some of those have functionality that Signagelive supports, like light bars. So if you want the sides of the screen to show green for available, red for occupied, that's all built in. Again, no additional work needed on your side. It's all built into those devices already. You've got your generic design. So if I go over to the generic designs, you can see some of the previous designs we've mentioned. And if I can highlight one or two of these, you can see they've just got some designs and functionality, depending on what you actually want to see when you're doing your calendar integration. Some of them are simpler, so just a full screen, full zone, explaining exactly what's going on. Great if you've got a screen that you actually want to utilize some other information on different locations. So you might want to have your playlist of videos or your updated board report or whatever it might be displaying on the side, whilst your meeting room is kind of taking up a segment of that screen. So you want that information nice and big to make it clear. You've also got that multi-room that I mentioned before. Regardless of which one you actually choose, the process is exactly the same. So just kind of looking through some of these, if I go and grab the idea templates, and again, there'll be more of the designs that I showed you a moment ago that will display on here shortly, but let's just say I take this one, nice and simple, and add that to Signagelive. That will then appear on the bottom right-hand corner to let me know that I've added this to my Signagelive network. I can then go back to, let me just zoom out here a little bit now, go to my recently added assets. We'll see the calendar widget template there, which will take a moment to actually render the thumbnail. But once that's rendered, we'll see it turn up. I'll give it a moment here just to actually connect in. It normally takes a couple of seconds, but I am impatient, so I'll just continue to, here we go. So I can click and drag my asset over. So at this point, as I've mentioned in other videos and kind of how the playlist editor works, this doesn't necessarily have to be the only asset in here. So if you want to display what's going on in this event, but every now and then it rotates out with a different image or a video or something along those lines, you're absolutely free to do that. There's no limitation in terms of how that asset works within the content and within the context of other assets. I double click on that asset now, I can go and paste in that API key, which is what I would have done. And then you have some options there depending on what app you've chosen, whether it's show only today's meetings or whatever it might be. That's pretty much all there is to it. Once that's done, that connection will update automatically. You can then publish this out to your device and you'll start seeing it appear on the screen automatically. And there's really not much more else to know about it. The simpler, the better in terms of getting this up and running. And at the end of the day, your experience is going to be fairly limited from the Signagelive user or the person that's managing Signagelive, because it should all be taken care of by the people that are actually booking the meetings themselves. And that's the core concept of making it very, very simple in terms of functionality. just to give you a couple of examples of where this has really been useful and where we've seen some of these kind of examples really flourish is schools. So obviously you've got different school boardrooms, or you've got meeting rooms, or you've actually got the school classes themselves. You could have a screen on the outside of each of those with the information updating automatically from an internal scoreboard or whatever it might be, that's managed automatically, or whether it gets updated every term or semester depending on where you're from. Obviously, you've got the kind of the benefit of it from a corporate scenario where you've got lots of different huddle spaces or meeting rooms, and again, all of that functionality is built in and free, and it can be utilized on that web content license, which is cheaper than your initial license. So a great streamlined, simple way to do room booking en masse within Signage Live, especially for those that are already using Signage Live for their digital signage. It's an excellent bolt-on additional functionality that you can just add into your network today. So hopefully that's been really useful to you. There's not too much else I want to go over in the room booking. There are some additional questions that I think could be raised, but it really kind of depends on what you guys want to talk about here today. So what I'm going to do is go over to the Q&A session with you guys, and if you've got any questions, let me know. We can go through it in more detail. There are more examples of scenarios we could talk about in room booking, but I think the simpler the better, really, in terms of this particular one. I can see we've got quite a few people on right now, so if you do have any questions, drop them in, and we'll talk about any particular scenarios or questions that you have around how this function works. But I think for today, really, is the simpler the better. This makes perfect sense in terms of how you get it set up, and it's not a long-winded process, but it's obviously very, very simple to set up, and then only ends up being managed by those on site. So I'm going to hop over to the QA section here. I'm still listening in. I'm still looking at the chat. So if there are any questions, we're going to go straight over to you, answer those questions, and we'll come forward. Again, if you've missed part of this or you want to go and revisit it later, this will be packaged up and put in the playlist for the Signage live streams. Thank you very much for joining us. Next week, we have got a meeting with Art Player, which is a third party that we'll be discussing in a little bit of detail and discuss how Signage Live works with some third party interaction.